In 1966, a movie came out. It was a comedy. It was called The Russians Are Coming. It's about a Russian submarine that gets stranded on a or stuck on a sandbar off a little town on the east coast of the United States. And it recounts how the Russian crew um, tries to get the sub off the sandbar. So some antics and some humor. And that movie was called The Russians Are Coming. Well, I think the Russians are here. And let me tell you why. Last Friday, when I was doing this show, agendas foreign and domestic, there was a lot going on. The Washington Post decided not to endorse a candidate, which was like the first time in about 50 years. The reason given on Friday was that the Washington Post wanted to return to its roots and not endorsing candidates. However, on Monday, yesterday, Jeff Bezos, who owns WAPO, wrote an editorial. And the editorial was simply an abject self debasement, complete surrender, uh, and an admission that the alt media and MAGA is right, that he is or he was fake news. So here's what he wrote. Here's what Bezos wrote. Quote, likewise with newspapers, we must be accurate. We must be believed to be accurate. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but we're failing on the second requirement. Most people believe the media is biased. Anyone who doesn't see this is paying scant attention to reality, and those who fight reality lose. Reality is an undefeated champion. It would be easy to blame others for our long and continuing fall in credibility and therefore decline in impact, but a victim mentality will not help. Complaining is not a strategy. We must work harder to control what we can control to increase our credibility. End of quote. I mean, that's just an abject surrender. That's saying that Trump was right all this time, that he was fake news. And this is significant because, as I said, the Trump-Musk insurgency is looking to reduce, to conquer these little holdouts, these little fortresses of opposition to the insurgency. And as I said earlier, this is really a conflict between two parts of the elites. And the Trump Musk elite want to take away this powerful publication from the establishment. This publication also projects American power. So, hence, that's why I say there's an overlay of interest here between what Trump Musk does and what Putin and Xi want. Because Putin and Xi want American instruments of power, centers of power, to be weakened. And MAGA and the alt media presents an alt narrative, which you can't trust them either. But it is an alt narrative that has been used against the so-called mainstream media, against the Washington Post, against other outlets. It's been used to delegitimate them and also to delegitimate other parts of our institutions and also to destabilize this country. So, in other words, the alt media with its alt narrative is a weapon against what I call the establishment media and the establishment message, which is also a large part of American power, what the establishment has. So, because the insurgency is not in power yet, and they're trying to get in power, and the voters are the foot soldiers. Okay. So, I mean, that was abject self abasement. So, today, the 29th, right, Elon Musk, who has over 200 million followers on Twitter, targeted the New York Times. He said the New York Times is a threat to democracy. There we go. And the reason that he targets the New York Times is because they're doing a story on Carlson, Poole, and some other people. So each side is calling the other side the threat to democracy. So you have an insurgency, some would say a civil war, and I do not by any means mean to say that there is violence involved. I'm saying this is strictly psyops. You have a psyops struggle going on between these two sides, and it plays out in the political arena during the presidential election. Now, there's going to be other targets of Musk Trump. There's going to be other targets, and if he gets elected, there'll be a lot of targets he'll go after. Um, and it's those targets are the traditional centers of American power, how we project power overseas. And if they disable or destroy those centers and don't properly remake them, then, or don't remake them at all, then the United States is weakened in the world. So there's an overlaying objective there, between what Trump Musk wants and what Putin and Xi want. Okay? Because they want the United States out of the world. And they want to take over. And more on that later. Okay. What Trump does, what Elon Musk does, because he's really in high relief now. He's always screeching free speech. So, what does that mean? Well, that means we're going to delegitimate. We're going to delegitimate. We're going to destroy the enemy centers of opposition. That's what that means. So what's very interesting, and at the same time he's destabilizing the country and delegitimating many American institutions. But what's really interesting is at the end of August there were some stories that came out. I don't know how we missed it, but at the end of August, from Yahoo, The Wrap, and Fortune, and these stories involved a lawsuit that Musk was involved in, and he was forced by a judge to reveal the investors in Twitter. The people who helped him scrounge up money to buy Twitter, which was bought for, I think, $44 billion. So the venture capital firm was 8VC, and it had various people who participated in the venture capital endeavor in buying Twitter. One of them was Dennis Avram. The other one was Jack Moskowitz. Dennis Avram's father is Peter Avram, and Jack Moskowitz's father, I believe, is Vadim Moskowitz. Well, who are they? Well, the fathers are Russian oligarchs, and they are reportedly very close with Putin. So we're seeing some trails here with Elon Musk go back to Putin. We also know there was a Wall Street Journal article that came out on Thursday or Friday of last week describing Elon Musk's connections with Putin and communications with Putin as a private individual. And so you take that and you take all of the reports and the books and the materials that are out there on Trump and his connection with Putin or other Russian leaders, and you have got a situation. Now, today on Twitter or X, there was a story that came out from Next to TV. Next to TV is a news service, Eastern Europe. And they were talking about an article from Financial Times. I did not read the Financial Times article. But Nexta says the Financial Times has revealed Trump's plan. He will include a kind of Minsk III agreement and put the implementation on Europe, which means the U.S. steps back, out of the way. Then the article refers to J.D. Vance, his peace plan, which was a demilitarized zone on the current line of contact between Russian and Ukrainian troops, heavily fortified to prevent Russia from repeating the invasion. In return, Ukraine would refuse to join NATO, preserving its sovereignty at the cost of neutrality. Now, I'm going to get back to that in a minute. Okay, so FT sources told Next to TV that if Trump gets back to the White House, he intends to act at breakneck speed to end the war. And, quote, under Trump's plan, Ukraine would remain outside NATO, and the responsibility for peacekeeping would shift to European countries. The role of the U.S. and NATO would be minimized. There'd be autonomous zones, both sides of the militarized line. And meanwhile, Trump will threaten ever higher tariffs to force America's allies to spend more on defense and align their trade relations with the U.S. while keeping pressure on China. End of quote. Okay, so let's do one at a time. Okay, so the peace plan for Ukraine. They say here that Ukraine will preserve its sovereignty at the cost of neutrality. Well, as I explained in an article on the website of the American Proposition, October 3rd, um, if you're forced to be neutral, you've lost your sovereignty. That's international law. Okay. If you're forced to be neutral, you've lost your sovereignty. Because part of sovereignty is to have the right and the ability to make alliances to protect yourself. And Russia's already recognized the sovereignty of Ukraine. They did that in December 1994 with the Belgrade Memorandum, I believe. So they're supposed to respect it. They've recognized it. They need to respect it. So this is giving Putin what he wants. Because if you make Ukraine neutral, then Russia is going to continue to try to destabilize the country and may even succeed, like they've done in other countries, Moldova, Georgia, other places. Even in this country, the Russians, and there's a story on that. I mean, there's a show on that right there. Even in this country, they are trying to destabilize this country with information operations. So they'll do that with Ukraine, and in time there will be a coup in Ukraine, and then Russia will step in. So by giving Russia this, by making Ukraine neutral, Trump is giving Putin what he wants, and he's got ties to Putin, and Putin's former KGB, and Trump is a narcissist, so he's got a lot of weaknesses that can be played, and there's a lot of evidence that Trump has a relationship with Putin. And he's not telling us about that. He's not telling us a lot about it. He's not telling us much about it, if anything. And then in addition, the next article says, Trump will threaten ever higher tariffs to force America's allies to spend more on defense and align their trade relations with the U.S. Okay, so if you're going to put tariffs on your allies, you're going to break up the alliance. Okay? You're breaking up the alliance. And that's going to be the end of NATO and the Western Alliance. They've called Trump the orange wrecking ball. Yeah, I think that's right. And if you break up the NATO alliance and you give away Ukraine, that's something that Putin and Xi want. And Putin and Xi are bad guys. And that's what they want. The U.S. pulls out of the world, they get more prestige and wealth because Ukraine's a very wealthy country. They get all of those things. And so all of this makes me think the Russians are here. Vladimir Putin's a billionaire, by the way. He and his oligarchs run the country. They don't have free speech. They don't have free press. You criticize the war, you criticize Putin, you go fight on the front. Putin's worth about $200 billion from the reports I've seen. The war has displaced 6 million people. I mean, it's probably about 1 million dead and wounded by now, both sides combined. And Putin is busy building 25 re-education camps or concentration camps. That's it for today.